Great. Thank you, Andrew, and welcome everybody. I want to thank you all for taking an hour out of your very busy schedule to spend time with us. We hope you'll find our presentation today informative and value add for you. What I will do is cover here a quick overview of AWS. I know some of you may be already customers of AWS and familiar with our services, but some may not be. So I'll give you a quick brief overview of AWS. I'll cover a little bit in depth our partnership with SAP, where we've been, where we are, and where we're heading. We'll talk about how you run SAP solutions on AWS and why companies migrate and move their SAP workloads to the AWS Cloud. We'll share with you some use cases and case studies, and then we'll discuss some next steps. We will be having a follow-on webinar tomorrow night, which will be more focused on the how to implement SAP workloads on the AWS Cloud. Okay. So who is AWS? AWS is a component of Amazon. Amazon consists of three main business lines. Amazon Retail, the one that most people are familiar with, Amazon.com, the global e-business retailer. Amazon Services, where we offer and resell services and help our partners sell their services through our marketplace and products. And then Amazon Web Services. This is the infrastructure as a service business. It was started in 2006. Essentially from the learnings that we garnered from managing the infrastructure to run the world's largest e-tailer. We're able to take those learnings in terms of that infrastructure, take it into a set of services that we've been able to make available to our customers as part of the Amazon Web Services business. When you look at Amazon Web Services, it's really a collection of core capabilities that enable hundreds of thousands of customers across 190 countries to run their applications on our cloud. The core of our services are really in the compute, storage, and database area. On top of that, we provide a set of application services, the ability to deploy and administer them effectively. Underneath that is tied to network services, and then sitting on our AWS Global Infrastructure. When you look at our global infrastructure today, and this is as of today, we basically have data centers in 9 regions across the world, with 25 availability zones and 38 edge locations. This gives our customers a lot of comfort in terms of managing their mission-critical business applications on our cloud, knowing that they're going to be secure and safe, and that we also have dramatic scalability in meeting their business needs as they grow as entities. So when you look at how enterprises are using AWS today, we see different modes. One of the typical modes we see is a hybrid mode, where they keep some of their applications on-premise but are leveraging the AWS Cloud to basically enhance the capabilities they need when they need them. Could be new product launches, mergers and acquisitions activities, divestitures. We have some companies that migrate their apps and all their data to the cloud. In these particular cases, they're looking at leveraging the value of the cloud, the elasticity, the agility, the speed, and lowering the total cost of ownership of managing their infrastructure and the complexities that come with managing your own data centers. Then we have other companies that have completely started their entire businesses on the Amazon cloud. We have numerous amounts of startups that basically build their initial apps on our cloud, did not want to invest in the infrastructure, but then were able to launch their app and maybe got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 million downloads off the Apple iStore, for example, and able to scale dramatically by leveraging our services and our infrastructure rather than building out their own. One of the interesting facts that we often share with our customers, if you look at Amazon in 2003, when we were a $5.2 billion retail business, today in 2013, we add the same amount of server capacity that we basically leveraged in 2003 to basically run our entire business. That's an amazing fact if you think about the amount of capacity that we are adding to our cloud on a daily basis. So our customers are large and small. They run from startups to global 100 companies running all types of different workloads. Some are running test instances, some are running development instances. Some of these companies run their entire mission-critical systems on our cloud. And they leverage us for many of the key reasons that we'll share with you a little bit later, especially around the SAP workloads, whether it's speed, agility, differentiation, saving costs, and moving out of the expensive business of dealing with hardware refreshes. But we're not just on the commercial side, also on the public sector side. Many of these organizations are running significant amounts of their business on our cloud. In order to do that, we have to be very, very secure. And they have to be comfortable that the data there is secure. So we are very conscious in terms of that. We meet all the key requirements that we have to in terms of SOX, ITAR, FIPS, FISMA, ISO. And the nice thing for our customers is that we're often able to provide to them a level of security around their data protection, data privacy, that they're unable to achieve themselves, and we're able to offer that and maintain that for them so they can leverage that in terms of taking their businesses to market, leveraging our infrastructure. One thing that's very interesting here, Gartner just released a new Magic Quadrant here for infrastructure as a service. One of the things we have here is the last 3 Gartner Magic Quadrants, 2011, 2012, and 2013. What you'll see here is Amazon Web Services in the top right-hand corner in each of these 3 different quadrants. But what's really interesting here and what's really impressive is what's happened in the last quadrant. The gap between us is getting bigger and bigger each time these quadrants come out. And that's because we're doing 2 things in an unprecedented way. Not only are we scaling, but we're also innovating. A lot of companies can scale, a lot of companies can innovate. But what we are doing with increased velocity is both scaling and innovating. This is why we've seen such a dramatic adoption in terms of companies running their applications on our cloud, and also a dramatic adoption, especially by SAP customers, in moving their workloads to the AWS environment. So when you look at SAP customers and how they like to run on our cloud, it really follows a similar concept to our core customers and how they run on our cloud. In the SAP perspective, production support systems, development and test systems, non-production systems, we've seen a very rapid migration of these, training systems, prototypes. Why maintain an infrastructure on-premise when you can rapidly put training systems, get them up and running, do your training, switch them on, switch them off, and move on to the next one without having to manage that costly infrastructure. And then we've also seen the movement of production and disaster recovery systems onto us. I'll be covering these in a little bit more detail later in terms of the traditional workloads, and also some examples of how customers have migrated their SAP workloads onto us. Now I want to cover quickly a quick overview of our partnership with SAP. So SAP has been an AWS customer since 2008, and SAP basically leverages AWS in a multitude of ways. They're leveraging us today for running internal systems. They leverage us for pilots and proof of concepts for end customers. They leverage us today for some development activities that they're doing. And we have a very, very tight relationship. We have a lot of offerings that I'll discuss in a minute that are basically combined offerings between SAP and AWS out in the marketplace. We are a global technology partner. There's only about 30 of those with SAP, so it gives us unprecedented abilities to work with the SAP engineering team and with the executive team in terms of our strong partnership. And we have numerous products that are certified by SAP to run on our cloud. When you look at the products that are certified, you can read them off here. They range from the core ERP products, Business Suite, Business All-in-One, the rapid deployment solutions, business objects, SAP HANA 1. We recently released last week at the TechEd in Las Vegas support for bring your own license for HANA for environments ranging from 244 gigs to 1.2 terabytes. This was announced by Dr. Vishal Sikka in his keynote address, where in that address he also shared with the audience that SAP have been looking to scale out on 10,000 cores, and we're basically working with 625 instances of Amazon CC2 to demonstrate massive scale out of HANA on our cloud. So not only are we actually enhancing more instances, but we're also working with SAP to demonstrate dramatic scalability on our cloud. So see the databases that we support here, IBM, SQL Server, ASE, and then of course on the operating side, the Windows and Linux platforms that we support. So what does SAP say about AWS? So here's a couple of quotes here from a couple of the key executives at SAP, Dr. Sanjay Poonen and Sapan Panigrahi. Probably the key one and the most important one is the one that is made by Sanjay Poonen here, where he talks about world-class business applications running on the world-class infrastructure. And this is really the key and the key and the kernel of our relationship with SAP is that we are providing the world-class infrastructure running the world-class business applications from SAP. And where we've seen the rapid adoption across small companies, the medium-sized market, and also the enterprise market in terms of the adoption of SAP workloads on our cloud. So one thing I mentioned earlier in our partnership, we have 18 joint solutions with SAP in the marketplace today. These range from ones that we've released recently, like the SAP BW trial of HANA on AWS. It's a 30-day free trial of 128 gigs of HANA that you can leverage. It runs on the AWS Cloud. If you go to the sapafaria.com site, the mobility device management offering, that is also running on the AWS Cloud. The cloud appliance library that SAP is offering, which is primarily on the test and dev side but will soon move to production, is also exclusively offered on the AWS Cloud. And then on our own site, on our AWS Marketplace, you can find some offerings. We have SAP HANA 1 Business Edition, which is a limited version of HANA. It's 60 gigs, but does not include data services or enterprise support. But it's a very nice and easy on-ramp in terms of leveraging HANA on our cloud. Also, it's very consumer effective in terms of that you can leverage that solution for 99 cents per hour for HANA and about $2 an hour for the infrastructure. So it's a nice way for companies that are interested in looking at HANA to get started, and then from there they can migrate into the bigger instances that we have from 244 gigs up to 1.22 terabytes. So these are the various HANA solutions that we have currently today available to run on AWS. First one that you can see here is HANA 1 Premium. HANA 1 Premium is a yearly subscription offered by SAP that runs on our cloud. This is also limited to 60 gigabytes, but it does include full enterprise support and full data services. The middle one here, SAP HANA 1 Business Edition, is the one I just discussed. This is available on our marketplace. It's available on demand, and it's available at 99 cents per hour. One of the nifty things about this is that you can actually spin this up in about 5 to 6 minutes and get running on your HANA workloads. But as I mentioned, it does have some drawbacks. It's limited in terms of its size, 60 gigs, and it's also limited in terms of the functionality of having full data services and also enterprise support. There's also the Developer Edition for HANA, which is available through the SAP SCN, and this will soon also be available on the AWS Marketplace. Well, we launched at TechEd last week, and we've already seen a dramatic interest in this around the world from our existing enterprise, mid-market, and startup customers, is the launch of the HANA Bring Your Own License on AWS. So what we actually released last week was basically essentially five versions of this. It's really a single version with scale out, 244 gigs up to 1.22 terabytes. The nice thing about this, and I was actually in the booth at TechEd where we had a very large oil and gas company come in, we were able to show them how they could spin up an instance of HANA scaled out to 5 nodes or 1.22 terabytes, and we were able to do it whilst they were still in the booth. It took us about 20 minutes, which is unprecedented. They were telling us a classic story that we hear time and time again, that it was taking them 4 or 5 months to get 1 terabyte appliances delivered from some of the hardware vendors. So once again, very compelling. You're very easily and able to deploy HANA, get started on your HANA-based workloads, shorten the cycles of deployment, and get that rich functionality out into the business where it belongs. Okay, so let's talk about why companies start to run their SAP workloads on AWS. Probably one of the most key areas, and it came up in the poll earlier, is to lower the overall cost. There was a study done by the VMS group out of Germany. They have a benchmark database of 2,500 SAP customers. And they looked at the cost of the infrastructure of deploying on-premise in a traditional kind of data center environment versus running those same applications, those same workloads on the AWS Cloud. And they came up with a conclusion that by moving those applications to our cloud, you can realize savings of up to 71%. This ranged on the larger size from about, I think it's about 62%, but for the all-in-one customers, it was 71%, and that is very, very compelling. But it's not just the only reason why companies start to migrate their workloads to us. From a finance perspective, being able to move away from the CapEx model to OpEx, it's a well-known value proposition for movement of any applications to the cloud. But it's really compelling when you look at the type of infrastructure that's typically required to run SAP. You can see studies out there, and you can look in your own environments and just count the number of instances that you have. What is the ratio of non-production instances of SAP to production instances? In many cases, it's somewhere between, or can be between 5 to 10 times. When you look at the amount of capital expense that you have on that, being able to move that to an operational expense, when you look at the way you consume our cloud services on an hourly basis, there's a true financial benefit. But really, when you take the overall cost, what does that mean? What it really means for our customers is leveraging our cloud to provide a few key things into the business. The first one is to bring speed and agility. And what we mean by that is being able to deploy SAP rapidly, shorten those cycles down in the development cycles that you have. Cut the provisioning of systems, cut the provisioning of POs to buy new hardware, being able to leverage infrastructure on demand. That's one of the key compelling advantages of running SAP on our cloud. I was talking to a CIO of a very large company just a couple of weeks ago, and he was sharing with me that they estimate they have about 6 to 7 years of backlog of SAP projects. One of the key reasons, one of the key critical path factors was the ability to procure and provision hardware effectively. So we estimated, and working with them, that we can actually reduce that backlog significantly. And what does that do? It enables the business to then focus away from providing infrastructure and away from dealing with those components that really don't drive differentiation, to focus on adding that functionality, that rich functionality that exists within SAP to drive new business processes for all stakeholders that attach to the business, whether it's customers, partners, suppliers, etc. And then, of course, we provide all this in a self-service way that will also eliminate the ability and the need to deal with the complex and costly hardware refresh cycles that typically happen in data center environments. When you start to move your SAP workloads to the cloud, hardware refresh cycles become a thing of the past, because we'll do that for you. So here's a little bit more detail about the study that I was just discussing about TCO. As you can see here in this second row, the savings range anywhere from 62% for large ERP, that would be Business Suite, to 71% of the infrastructure costs when it comes to SAP All-in-One. This study is available on our website. If you go to amazon.com/AWS/SAP, you will be able to download and read this white paper at your leisure. And I would definitely encourage you to do that if you're looking at putting together either some type of MPV or ROI of moving your on-prem SAP workloads to our cloud. We've already just discussed some of these, but we often see this when we're talking with the key executives in companies. What are they looking at? What are the things that are driving them to move their SAP workloads to our cloud? From a CFO perspective, obviously they want to make sure their financials are viable, but they do like the fact that they can move to this OpEx model. Anything you can do to cut down the tax liability in a P&L is very compelling. From a CEO perspective, it's more about driving the business. It's more about that factor I discussed earlier about agility and speed and differentiation, leveraging that significant investment that was made in SAP, being able to leverage that rich functionality. One of the challenges a lot of SAP customers have today is really being able to leverage all that functionality that exists. The one thing about SAP is there's so much functionality. Being able to leverage that and bring that into improving your business processes and differentiating your products and services out in the marketplace is really what we see from the top-level executive. And then from a CIO perspective, moving from a service provider to a service broker, being able to rapidly focus on non-value-added activities and focus on providing quick wins to the business is really what we're seeing in terms of the reasons why CIOs are proposing moving the SAP workloads to our cloud. So when you look at what those workloads are, when you look at typically production workloads, we have customers migrating, whether they're small startups, whether they're medium-sized business or large enterprises. We've seen them migrate development, test, production, and disaster recovery workloads to our cloud. For some large companies, 2 or 3 years ago, when they were just starting the adoption of SAP workloads onto the AWS Cloud, we saw movement in the development and test area, being able to rapidly move development projects to us, spin up the resources, turn them off, turn the compute capacity off at when you leave the office, whether it's at 9 o'clock at night or at 7 o'clock at night, turn it back on in the morning, and reap some of those dramatic savings, and also the agility of being able to instantly provision those environments for those workloads. Moving into test and production. We've seen other customers that have basically deployed their entire workloads on us from the very beginning, dev, test, production, and disaster recovery. So one of the nice things about the AWS Cloud is that you have flexibility. You can do this completely. You can do it in steps. You can do this as a hybrid model, leveraging some of your on-premise infrastructure for some things that you may want to keep on-premise. What we're doing is providing unprecedented flexibility in terms of the choices that you have to manage your SAP workloads onto our cloud. When you look at the non-production workloads, I mentioned training earlier. Training is a classic example, and it's also been one of some of the first areas, some of our early adopter customers that wanted to dip their toe in the water. You put their training systems onto our cloud, realized how quickly and efficiently it was. Then they started to move their production workloads on us, the ones we just discussed, the test, the devs, the production, disaster recovery. POCs and sandboxes, also great examples. New functionality, you get it up, demonstrate the functionality very, very quickly, and then turn it off. We had a large customer in the US, for example, that was looking at business objects at Estee Lauder. And they weren't sure whether they were going to actually go through the capital process and the budgetary process to get approval because they didn't really have the business case. So one of their IT executives decided to actually deploy a small license or business objects on our cloud, demonstrate the capability, demonstrate the value around a business scenario, and then get that buy-in to secure a significant budget to roll that environment out to great benefit for the business. The interesting thing about this is that initial project they did, the infrastructure piece they ran on the AWS Cloud, essentially cost Estee Lauder about $500. So they didn't have to go out and procure hardware. They were able to quickly spin up an instance on our cloud, do their sandbox, do their prototyping, demonstrate the value, and then basically secure the investment to drive that value into the business. And then another key area here is archiving. Archiving, and another word for this is a lot of companies run old SAP systems where they're keeping old data running just in case there's an audit or the CFO or somebody in finance wants to dig into customer history from 5-6 years ago. All those environments are great environments that should be moved to the cloud. Why maintain the infrastructure? Why keep the infrastructure up and running? Just put it onto our cloud, turn it on when you need it, turn it off when you don't. Save that money and put that money to better use within your business. So when you look at how we run and what the types of services that are required to run SAP applications on our cloud, what I really want to cover here is that we provide, from the AWS side, we provide all the physical infrastructure, the compute, the storage, the networking, everything up to the hypervisor. But on top of that, there's a set of services that have to be provided. The OS administration, the backup and recovery, and then of course on top of that, you have the traditional SAP services, the basis level and the functional level. Most of our customers today will either provide this gray area here, they'll provide these managed services themselves, or they'll leverage a third party. You can leverage your existing third-party provider to provide those managed services, or you can leverage one of our partners that our local teams will be happy to put you in contact with. So when you look at typical deployment topologies, here what I'm showing here is one of the things I discussed earlier, a hybrid deployment. In this particular environment, this is a customer that's running their production systems on-prem, but they're running essentially all the development and test systems on the AWS Cloud. So this is one example of how you can leverage a hybrid environment in terms of running SAP environments. We've seen some large enterprises start this way. One particular I can bring to bear here is Lionsgate, that started with moving their test and dev instances onto the AWS Cloud, and now they're basically moving their production environments into the cloud. Then we have other customers that essentially move their entire environments to us from day one. They put it into a virtual private cloud in us, run their entire environments, and don't worry about the tremendous cost and complexity of running their own data centers and all the associated costs of cooling that come with that, the power, etc., the people costs, dealing with the racks, etc., and networks. So when you look at those services I was talking about earlier, I just wanted to break those down into a little bit more detail. So when you look at the infrastructure services that you need to provide on top of running on our cloud, we've got the OS, we've got the backup and recovery, the network and security, the monitoring. On top of that, you get your traditional kind of SAP hosting services. Typically what we see is companies will either do it self-managed, so they have the capacity internally, they have the resources in their IT organizations to support a self-managed model, or they'll want to leverage a managed services provider, a managed services partner that's already working with AWS. Depending on what works for you, we support both. So if you want to manage them yourself, that's great. We will help you with getting started on our infrastructure and learning how to do that, so you become very self-sufficient very, very quickly. If you want to work with a partner because you're very lean and mean on IT, we'll be happy to put you in contact with one of our certified partners that will be providing those managed services for you. So when you look at the type of licensing that's available for SAP on AWS, just to be clear for everybody, this is a traditional bring your own license model. So you bring your own licenses, you bring your own license keys. The HANA release that we just did is bring your own license, and then you run them on us. So it's just the same as you would do with your on-prem, but leveraging it on our cloud. We do have a few mechanisms today where that we actually do provide licenses, SAP licenses, or the ability to leverage SAP licenses to our customers. One of those that I mentioned earlier is on our AWS Marketplace. It's the SAP HANA 1 Business Edition, where you can actually rent a license of SAP for 99 cents per hour and about $2 for the infrastructure. There's also a version of Business Objects on our marketplace through a partner where you can actually buy a subscription to about blocks of about 5 licenses. And then we have numerous trial and developer editions available that you can leverage and get to leverage some of the new products with SAP. The Afaria trial, We mentioned that earlier. That's really now available on sapafaria.com, where you can actually do a 30-day trial of the mobile device management, and several other ones here too. So if you're not familiar, let me quickly discuss the different types of pricing models that we have when you deploy SAP on our cloud. So one of the pricing models that we have is on demand. On-demand pricing is our most expensive pricing typically. It's on a sort of by-the-hour basis. And this is typically used for those instances that you may want to turn on and turn off very quickly. So we see these things being used for test instances, demos, training, proof of concepts, where you basically want to come on, you have a short time frame project, but you need access to resources, to infrastructure resources. So you dynamically provision these, very, very quickly. You get up and running quickly, and then you turn them off when you're done with them, and you move on to the next project. That's typically how we see our on-demand pricing leverage for SAP customers. When we look at SAP customers moving to production, it's typically moving into more the reserved instance. So our reserved instance pricing typically is in 1 or 3 year terms. We have 3 different versions of this: light, medium, heavy. Each one comes with a fee, a yearly fee, and the yearly fee goes up as you move from light to heavy, but the per hour cost goes down. So typically what we see is, like for SAP production workloads, where we're looking at having these instances on 7 times 24, 1 year heavy utilization tends to be a scenario that customers adopt in terms of deploying that. Typically that will be deployed in a virtual private cloud, on the AWS cloud. But here's some ideas of the different pricing models. Once again, the pricing models are developed to provide our customers the flexibility to leverage the cloud and consume it as they want to. Do they want to consume it on a per hour basis at a more expensive cost, but for a short term, or are they going to be running in production where they know they're going to have a fixed demand of time for it? So it's better off having a reserved instance model where they pay a fee up front, but they get a much lower hourly rate for their consumption model. So tremendous flexibility. Most of our SAP customers tend to use multiple different pricing models depending on the workloads. So this will be something that you would want to sit down with your AWS solution architect, your AWS account executive, or your AWS partner in terms of making sure that you're optimizing how you leverage our cloud for your business, so you can actually reap the tremendous benefits from the TCO that you can garner from it. Okay, so I wanted to throw in a quick pricing example. I actually ran through this with somebody at TechEd last week, and this is just a small SAP test development demo system. You can see here we've got 4 cores, 15 gigabytes of memory. When it's going to be online, 8 to 8, 240 hours a month. When you look at the various pieces of the cost here, and you can see the different AWS resources, whether it's from the compute, the storage, etc., the data transfer, the total monthly cost of this is just $198. I shared this with someone. They were dumbfounded they could get this kind of capability. And this is based on pricing from our US East region. It may not be the region that you would look at depending on where you are. But it shows you just how dynamic and the price points you can leverage very dramatically in terms of running SAP projects very, very quickly. As I mentioned earlier, we have a number of partners, both consulting and managed partners globally, that will be able to support you both with your migration of your on-premise environments to our cloud, and also with the managed services around that. You can contact your local AWS resources. They'll be able to put you in contact with the various partners in the various regions and in your localities that will be able to provide those services to you. You can also look at where these partners are on our website, the Amazon/AWS SAP website, and look at the partners there. Let's talk about some customer use cases. So here's one customer I'd like to talk about, Capgemini. Capgemini is doing a lot of work right now with AWS. They have a series of solutions that they call the edge solutions, which are verticalized industry solutions, which they're migrating all of those onto our AWS Cloud. But they started on us with training. They realized that they had a large training environment, large training landscape, which was really costing them a lot of money to run, and it really didn't make sense to do that. They were able to move that to our cloud, turn those training systems on, turn them off when they don't need them, and make some dramatic cost savings in terms of that piece of their infrastructure spend. Another example here, this is an all-in-one customer, Merrifield Garden Center. This is an example of a company that essentially moved their entire SAP environment to the AWS Cloud in one go. Test, development, production, disaster recovery. They didn't want to take on the cost of investing in large data centers, deal with the heating, the cooling costs, the electricity costs, the expensive costs to maintain that data center. Really wanted to leverage something very, very flexible and focus on their core business. So they moved their entire environment onto us in one go. Here's an example of a customer that basically created a business on the AWS Cloud around SAP. EMBI, they provide analytics to emergency centers for large hospitals in the US here. And they really wanted to rapidly deploy, get their analytics out into the marketplace so they could sell it to the hospitals for the analytics they provide around how you can optimize the use of your emergency rooms. They were able to rapidly deploy their solutions, business object solution on AWS, and very rapidly move from incubation of a thought to profitability on us. This is an example of a startup customer. So right now we've seen the example of a startup customer, a large global SI, and also a mid-market company. This one, the logo is a little bit hard to read, but this is Lionsgate. This is what I was discussing earlier. Here's a company, an enterprise company that's basically started off with test and dev. Realized they were spending a lot of money on test and dev environments, and they wanted to move out of that business and dramatically improve the timing of their ability to deliver new functionality to the business. And part of that was, a big piece of that was moving away from on-prem infrastructure to moving onto our cloud. Lionsgate is now in the process of now moving their production environments onto our cloud. So they've gone from having a hybrid model to basically moving their entire business, or at least their SAP workloads, onto our cloud. And here's an example of another non-production environment. This is a disaster recovery environment. A company called Vicays, which through an audit realized they didn't really have a good DR environment and didn't want to invest in building up that same environment with the same server horsepower on site. Realized they could do it very quickly, with a tremendous amount of speed, agility, and really a lower cost, because they're able to have the DR environment running on our cloud, turn off the compute when they don't need it, and turn it back on when they do need it and if they need it. And this has been tremendous value for them. And we've seen quite a significant uptick very recently in terms of DR environments moving to our cloud. I would say over the last couple of years, across all the environments, the movement of SAP customers and the adoption has been quite prolific in terms of all different workloads, and it just continues to grow. And obviously that's really as a result of the major benefits that companies are seeing from the speed, the agility, the lower TCO, the move from the CapEx to the OpEx, and really driving differentiation into their business. So let's talk about a few next steps here. First of all, let's share with you where you can get the resources. I've mentioned this URL a few times in the presentation today, aws.amazon.com/SAP. You can find the white papers here, details on the customer success stories, support notes, and also those studies, like what I mentioned earlier, the VMS cost study, where we were showing anywhere between 62% to 71% TCO reduction. That study, that methodology is on there. You can download it. It's very usable for input into your ROI calculations, into your NPV calculations if you're looking at moving to the AWS Cloud. We also have a series of upcoming events coming up. We have a series of the second webinar in this series. This webinar series is a two-step series. The first one is really an overview of the business value and what customers are doing and the overview of our relationship with SAP. The second one gets into more the implementing of SAP solutions, the how-to piece. How do you work through our console? How do you start that migration? In your region, there's going to be one of these happening tomorrow. And I think the time is right. Yeah, the time looks like it's right on this one. It was wrong this morning. We also have globally here some key events coming up. We have an SAP Tech Ed in Amsterdam. We have our own reInvent conference, which is for our customers. So if you're already an existing customer of ours, we look forward to seeing you in Las Vegas on November 12th to the 15th. And then we're also a gold sponsor for SAP Tech Ed in Bangalore, December the 11th to 13th. And we'll have a booth there, and we're very, very excited about that and being able to be present at that SAP Tech Ed. Okay, so on that note, that concludes. I think we've got a couple of poll questions first, or do we want to go to the Q&A, Andrew?
Thank you, Peter. In your browser, you can see a Q&A window. Please submit your questions at this time for our presenters. While we are preparing for the Q&A, though, I would like to ask the audience if they would take a moment to respond to two short survey questions which evaluate today's presentation. First question is, please rate the usefulness of today's webinar. Please submit your answers and hit submit. And our second brief question is, how was the technical quality of today's presentation? You just take a moment to make a selection and hit submit. That would be appreciated. Well, thank you, and your feedback is appreciated and will help us better improve our webinar platform moving forward. We will now answer some of our questions from the audience.
Okay, I'll take the questions. I'll read them out, and I'll take a few of them, and I'll be reading out a few for one of my colleagues here, Namjay. So one of the questions here is, where do I purchase the license of SAP HANA? From SAP or AWS? So for HANA, if you're doing this in a BYOL model, and you would buy these from SAP or from an SAP partner, the only one that you can actually leverage on the AWS Cloud today is the HANA Business One environment, the HANA One environment that we have in our marketplace for 99 cents per hour. Okay, I'm going to read this one out for Namjay. SAP has many integrations with non-SAP systems. If I move SAP into AWS, how do I integrate SAP running on AWS with non-SAP systems in my own data center?
Hi everyone, this is Namjay here. Hope you can hear me okay. So in one of the earlier slides, we showed you a diagram of a hybrid IT deployment where we have systems running on AWS as well as on your own on-prem data center. The way you do the integration between AWS and your own data center is that we give you the ability to create a completely isolated area of the AWS cloud called the virtual private cloud. And you can connect to your own data center to the virtual private cloud via a VPN connection through the internet, or you can get a private leased line directly from your data center into AWS, which will then allow you to extend your own network into AWS. So your network and AWS network will appear as if it's running on the same infrastructure.
Great, thank you, Namjay. I'm going to take one here. My SAP system is running on Solaris, but we are considering migration to Linux. Is Linux a supported OS on AWS for SAP? I like this one because the answer is yes. All right, let's move on to another one here. Namjay, this one will be for you. As AWS is an infrastructure service, how could a true DR case, i.e. a disaster and not just a server failover, ever become possible with AWS? Most of the work around DR activation is beyond infrastructure / servers.
Sure. Perhaps I'll try and answer that with an example. So I guess the definition of a DR is different across a number of organizations. It could be defined simply as a loss of an entire data center, or it could mean it could also include a number of business continuity planning aspects as well. So if I could give you an example of what our customers are doing in the space of disaster recovery with AWS, is that we have an SAP customer who run their SAP production system on their on-prem data center, and they have established a VPN connectivity from their own data center to AWS Cloud. And then they've set up a standby database that's running on AWS, and they've set up a transaction log shipping. So they have a standby database that's running on AWS and replicating the transaction logs. So if the customer experiences a situation where they lose their data center, then they will simply fail over the user connection from their own data center into AWS, and only at the time that they actually invoke DR, they will actually bring up the application servers running on AWS. So it's an extremely cost-effective way of setting up a DR, a warm standby, and you're only using the resources for the purposes of the database replication, but not the app servers.
Great. Thank you, Namjay. Here's another one for you. How do I migrate an SAP system running in my own data center to AWS?
Okay, so SAP has a very well-established process for SAP System Migration. SAP call it a system copy, or if you're moving from one flavor of operating system database to another, SAP called this an OSDB migration. And it's a very, very well-established and well-documented process, fully supported by SAP. So if you wanted to move a system that's running on your own data center to AWS, you would use SAP's tools to do an export of your SAP system, and then you would then copy that system onto AWS, and then you would just simply import that as part of your new system build.
Great, thank you. Another question, Jay, for you. Is there any minimum SAP version we need before moving an SAP workload to the AWS cloud?
Yes, there is, and this is documented in a SAP OSS note. So for those of you who have access to SAP Service Marketplace, if you just simply search on the term AWS, you will get 4 OSS notes, and one of them is a prerequisite for running your SAP system on AWS, and it provides you with a minimum level of the NetWeaver or the software version that you need in order to run your SAP systems on AWS. So typically, as a general rule, anything that's running on NetWeaver 7 with a certain patch level, kernel patch level, is fully supported on AWS with the right combination of OS and database.
Question here I'll take. Do I need to have a SAP license in order to use SAP Business Suite, for instance, on AWS? The answer is yes. In the bring your own license model, you bring your own licenses and deploying on us just like you would on-prem, but on our cloud. Okay, let's have a look here. Do any of the technical documents or papers give detailed instructions of how to implement? So we have several guides on the website that we mentioned that should be showing up here. The Amazon.com/AWS SAP implementation guides, sizing guides, We have many guides in terms of when you go to just our website in general on security, for example, if you're interested in our security audits and what we publish around that, sizing, all those components are already there and for you guys to take a look at. Okay. Okay, one question here is, I'd like to speak to someone at AWS in my country about our SAP landscape. How can we leverage AWS for SAP? Who can I call? So from the general perspective, you can do that through basically coming to our website. But locally, Namjay, you want to add some color for that?
Yes, sure. We have representation certainly here in the APAC and worldwide. We have account reps and solutions architects based all around the world to help our customers. I'm not sure what is the best way for us to distribute my contact details. If I see the attendees on today's webinar, many people are based here in the APAC. I'm based out of Singapore, and I'll be happy to get contacted directly from all the attendees. Andrew, is there a way we can publish my email address on screen for everybody to take away and to contact me directly afterwards?
Unfortunately not. Probably the best thing to do for our audience is just to repeat slowly your email contact information.
Okay. Alternatively, you can see my email is on the screen. Anything that comes to me, I will make sure that I get to the appropriate country level account executive and solutions architect to support you with all your needs.